Welcome to the Pooch Parenting Podcast, a podcast for parents with dogs. I'm Michelle Stern, a certified professional dog trainer, mom, and former teacher. Living with kids and dogs at the same time can feel like a circus. I know because I lived it too. Join us as we interview a variety of experts and parents to discuss topics that will make parenting with dogs easier, safer, and less chaotic. Also, you can love living with your dog again. I'll always keep it real, which might even mean that you hear the messiness of life in the background on occasion, but at least you know you're not alone. In today's episode, I'm going to share a little story that I heard from a potential client because they have a rescue dog that bit their child, and they have a one bite policy, they said, for their family dog. So they are looking to have the dog go live somewhere else now. I totally understand having a one bite policy, which is what they described they have at their house. But I really do like to encourage families to consider the implications of having a one bite policy from both all of the family members' perspectives and also from the dog's perspective. I'm not going to choose sides here. I think that there are valid reasons for them absolutely to follow through with what they're thinking they might do. But also I do need them to start to consider a little bit more about why dogs bite and from the dog's perspective, what could have happened and whether or not that might be avoidable in the future. So dog bites are horrible. I'm not saying they're not, they absolutely are, but they're often quite complicated and there can be several mitigating factors. So in this episode, I would like to discuss how to make a decision about whether or not to implement a one bite policy if you have a dog and children. I totally understand why you might implement something like that, but I'd like to talk about it from, again, two perspectives, the family's perspective and the dog's perspective. So I'm going to dive in here, and I would like to remind you all that I do have a free resource that you can download to help you understand why your dog might growl. And the reason I'm mentioning this in relation to this particular podcast episode is that dogs often communicate by using their body. If they're uncomfortable, they demonstrate a variety of body language signals. And if we don't notice those body language signals, then what can happen is a dog will then growl afterwards. So if a family doesn't understand why a dog is growling in the first place, then it's going to be difficult to help everybody to feel safe. So I do have a free resource. If you check the show notes, there'll be a link to this. Also, I have this on my website, which is poochparenting.net/episode 83. Feel free to grab that free download there. But I want to start by just acknowledging that if a dog bites a child, it's terrifying. It's hard to overstate how terrifying that can feel, how overwhelming it can feel, how helpless you feel as a parent that something happened to your child on your watch because of a dog that you chose, a dog that you brought to live with your home because you're a kind and generous person. Now, in this case, this family got a dog from a rescue, so it can be really tricky because they may not know the dog's learning history or the dog's genetics. They may not know if that dog has experienced trauma in the past that might have led to this particular bite. I saw two different versions, actually, of the bite story in an email and in another form that was filled out. One said that the dog bit the child when the child was reaching out to pet the dog. The other version said that the dog bit the child when the child tried to hug the dog. It's really important for us as parents to understand that dogs often don't like to be approached for any variety of reasons. So if a dog was asleep and was approached without consent, or if a child startled a dog while it was resting, maybe didn't see the child coming. And that happens a lot with super cute dogs. Kids want to pet them. They want to hug them. But without proper boundaries and structure around when kids are allowed to pet dogs, dangerous things can happen. Now, in a dream world, you would have a dog that wouldn't care one way or the other, right? It could be asleep, it could be awake, it could be doing anything, and it would be happy to see the child. And in this case, the dog wasn't. So I'm not saying this dog was a great fit for this family, but I just want to acknowledge that we don't know what history the dog brings to the family, and we don't know specifically more details about this particular incident. But a dog is an individual that does need to be respected. And it's really easy to let your guard down, especially if you have multiple children, or if your children are even older. Maybe the kids are 6, 7, 10 years old. And so we let our guard down, and we may not be paying as much attention as we might if the child was a toddler around the dog. But in my opinion, parents do need to supervise kids of all ages with dogs, because we just don't know where the dog is coming from. And it's better to set the dog up for success by respecting it, and inviting the dog to the kids to say hi, as opposed to the kids approaching the dog. Now, this can just be confusing, right? Because if the parents think, oh, well, the kid was just trying to bite the dog, so the dog bit for no reason, that's hard, right? And it's hard to get over that. And it's hard to forgive that. And it's so easy to be like, this dog is gone. If I can't find another home for it, it might have to be euthanized, but I cannot have this happening again. And I agree, that is terrifying. However, the first thing I want parents to do is to really analyze why it happened in the first place, and to get really curious about that, because it's entirely possible that it could be prevented entirely in the future, and we can build positive relationships. So I would encourage families in situations like this to reach out to somebody like me. I'm a dog and child specialist, or a dog behavior consultant, certified professional dog trainer, only somebody that uses positive reinforcement, because obviously this dog is having some pretty big feelings, and we never want to punish a dog for communicating, right? We need to welcome communication and say, wow, thanks for letting me know you're uncomfortable. And so positive reinforcement dog professionals are really good at appreciating the communication in a dog. And we also like to teach people about dog body language, and helping them to understand how a dog feels and all of the factors that come into play when dogs are expressing themselves, and how a dog likes to be respected. It's also worth noting that kids are hard. Raising kids is hard. And it's interesting to note how just when a parent might be thinking that they're getting used to a particular developmental phase, that the child then moves into another different developmental phase. And now we have to figure it out all over again, right? Especially with your oldest child. It's your first time through it. And then in my case, at least, I had two incredibly different children. One was not neurotypical, and the other one was, but started to have some pretty significant anxiety because of what the other one was doing, and some of the challenging life experiences that we had as a family together. So you really have to look at your kids as individuals, and that can be so hard when you've never been a parent before, because you're really not just sure what to expect. And then you throw a dog with some weird behavior into the mix, and it can be very overwhelming. And it's natural for some parents to just say, oh, you know what, my life would be easier if I didn't also have to manage a dog who's willing to bite my kid. And I wouldn't blame them for making that decision. It's also worth noting that there are some dogs that really just don't love living with kids. And we do them a disservice by saying, I'm never going to rehome the dog. I took the dog in, and I have to commit to this dog for its entire life. And I admire that dedication. I really do. I do believe that dogs are family members. But I also really strongly believe that it takes a lot of love and compassion from the perspective of a dog guardian to recognize that a dog might be struggling and might be better suited living somewhere else. Also, If you as a parent are maxed out and you can't handle the additional stress of managing multiple children, plus play dates and visitors, and a dog who maybe has a hair trigger, you might not be a great parent with all that juggling. And for you to be your best self, it might be best for that dog to find somewhere more appropriate to live. So I do want parents to realize sometimes there are easy ways to prevent bites from happening again by managing the situation, by teaching everyone in the family to understand dog body language and those kinds of things, by teaching children. I'm a credentialed teacher, so I love to teach both parents and children. But also as a dog and child specialist, this is literally my niche, and I know the experience because I've lived it too of what so many parents are going through. This is a very tricky situation. So by having a one bite policy, parents have kind of a clear guideline. So if they get emotional, if they start wondering or having doubts, they might say, listen, we decided together as a team, one bite policy. If the dog bites one of our kids, it's out. And that removes all question about whether or not that's the right choice. I do sometimes think, though, that parents do need to dive in and consider a little bit more, despite the fact that they may be scared that something could happen again in the future, that they consider if this is something that's avoidable. They also honestly need to consider if this dog is going to get to stay alive much longer, because dogs that bite kids do struggle. And sometimes in other homes, they can have a hard time as well. So we do have to kind of decide, are we just relocating a ticking time bomb, or is this something that's workable? So this is complicated. And this is why bringing in an expert such as myself or many of my very smart colleagues is a good idea, just to talk you through these kinds of situations. And I just want to end the parenting perspective by just sort of saying that rehoming a dog doesn't mean that you don't love them, because sometimes loving an animal means setting them up for success elsewhere. So that's important to say. Now, I would like to look at this also from the dog's perspective, right? From a dog's perspective, some children are scary and they're unpredictable. And if this dog had trauma in the past, maybe related to inappropriate behavior by children, it's something that we have to consider that will impact the dog's future behavior around children. Because if a dog feels unsafe, just like humans, if we feel unsafe, we act out, a dog is going to do the same thing. And a dog will protect itself, as it should. Basically, any creature will defend itself. And dogs aren't the only animals that will bite if they feel cornered or stressed or trapped in any way. We also have to consider that dogs do communicate. Almost never does a dog bite out of nowhere. They give a lot of warning signs. Now, it's not the dog's fault if the human doesn't understand their warning signs. They're trying. They're using their body to communicate. Sometimes the body language is very obvious, like their ears are pinned back or their tail is tucked down or they're growling, right? These are things that are pretty obvious. But sometimes it's more subtle, right? And working with an expert will teach you what those subtle cues look like. I've also talked about it in other podcasts as well. So a dog that doesn't feel seen or listened to, even if it's expressing itself with dog body language, will then start to be more assertive. Maybe they will start growling. And if the growling isn't listened to, then they're going to bite. So they're trying to tell a kid, let's say, stop what you're doing. If I bite you, you're going to stop what you're doing. If you're reaching for me, if you're trying to pet me and I don't want you to, if you're trying to hug me and restrain me, or you're leaning over the top of me and I bite you, you're going to stop doing what you're doing, right? It's important to understand that it is not the dog's responsibility to stop a child in his tracks, stop a child from being a perceived threat. That role does belong to the parent. That is a parenting responsibility. So a dog that's put in a situation where it has to defend itself, it's kind of in an unfair situation, right? Now, I'm not saying that this is all your kid's fault, okay? But it's very common that it is. And I'm not saying that in a judgy way. I'm just saying that in in the truth way. I've been specializing in this field for almost 7 years. And often kids get bitten because they've done something really annoying, right? And when I was a kid, if we got bit by a dog, it was like, well, what'd you do to the dog? You deserved it, right? But the attitude these days is totally different than that. And also, people do get litigious and people get scared and people are very protective. And I don't blame them for being that way. And sometimes kids do stuff, but they don't know any better because they're kids, right? So a dog is trying to protect itself, but a kid is just being a kid. So that's where the parents really have to step in. They have to moderate these kinds of relationships because a dog isn't necessarily going to make the choice that a parent wishes it would. Parents say to me all the time, well, he could have just walked away. He should have just left the situation. But dogs don't always do that. And there's a variety of reasons for that, which I can talk to you about at a future time. Another thing to think about is that a single bite may not give an adequate information, let's say, at determining whether or not this dog should remain in the home. So some dogs do bite for a good reason. And some bites by dogs can be prevented in the future by using effective management strategies, right? And again, from the dog's perspective, if living with children is a really stressful experience, it is possible that a dog is biting in order to get space, in order to get relief from the stress of interacting with that child in any given moment. And maybe the dog is saying, I would be a lot happier living somewhere else. So if you are a family that has a one bite, you're out policy for the family dog, I certainly don't blame you for having a policy like that. It can make your decision-making a lot easier if something bad happens. But I would encourage you to look at this from different angles. How's the dog feeling? What could have caused the bite? Is this something you want to work through? Is this something you have the bandwidth to work through? Or do you think maybe the dog would really be happier living elsewhere? In which case, go for it. See if you can find another place for that dog to live. Now, it's worth noting that many dog breeds have breed-specific rescues, but many of them are over-impacted. And I have to be really honest with you, if you relinquish a dog who's bitten a child to an animal shelter, there is a decent chance that that dog will be euthanized. So you'd need to know that going in. I am not trying to guilt you into not doing it. I just want you to know what could happen if you do. Also, sometimes by working with a dog professional, we can help you figure out some other options. We can work on management strategies in the meantime until you come up with a solution that makes you happy for the dog and helps you with an overall better outcome for every family member, including the dog. I hope you found this episode helpful. Thank you for listening to the Pooch Parenting Podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe on your favorite podcast player and leave a review. But even better yet, tell a friend. Are you in some moms groups, perhaps? Or maybe you're friendly with your pediatrician. Please let them know that resources like this exist, because the information that I share with my people goes beyond what most baby books offer, and a lot of parents need support. You'd be doing them a favor. Thanks again. Have a great day.